Like many of you, as the new year dawned, or actually shortly before the new year this year, I decided to get a head start on my New Year's resolutions. And like many of you, one of the most common New Year's resolutions is what? I'm going to lose weight, exercise, do whatever it takes. And I realize that we're right now at that tipping point, about mid-February, where those New Year's resolutions are being challenged, because you realize that, it's one thing to make a resolution, it's another thing to follow up on it, and it's another thing to stay with it over the long haul. So fortunately, I'm still in the gym and still more or less abiding by the new diet that I kind of set out for me. But I'll tell you, this whole issue of taking care of ourselves physically, and particularly knowing and doing things that are healthy for our hearts, is a lot more complicated than I ever imagined it until I started doing all the research into it. Now, everybody tells you that the two key ingredients are diet and exercise. Well, great. How much exercise? What kind of exercise? And oh, by the way, let's talk about diet for a minute. Some people say, it's the carbohydrates that are bad for you. And other people say, no, don't worry about the carbohydrates. Eat as many as you want. It's the fat content you have to pay attention to. Others will say, no, just stay away from sugar and all will be well. And so you get conflicting advice in terms of what kind of diet is really a heart-healthy diet. And so it's a lot more complicated than I ever imagined it to be. And so I've kind of just quit reading the advice, okay? I've kind of gone back to the whole common sense approach when it comes to maintaining a healthy body, and particularly when we talk about health. The one thing that we usually try to work on most is the cardiovascular system, because we usually realize and understand if the heart is more or less healthy, everything else will be. Now, there are a lot of factors that can contribute to an unhealthy heart, including genetics, including diet, including lack of exercise, and any number of factors. And and there is a point in time when no matter what we do, I hate to say this, but sooner or later it's going to stop. And that's a reality each and every one of us experience. But in the meantime, there are some things we can do to hopefully keep it healthy. Fortunately, maintaining a spiritually healthy heart may not always be any easier, but it is a lot simpler. It is a lot simpler. It is not as complicated, because one of the things that threatens a healthy heart is this stuff we call cholesterol. And oh, by the way, now we not only have cholesterol, we have good cholesterol, we have bad cholesterol. Okay, and trying to distinguish, well, which one is good and which one is bad is an almost impossible thing to do, because I'm not a chemist and neither are you. Fortunately, the Bible is a little more clear on this, because the Bible makes it pretty clear what are the things that kind of form that plaque in our spiritual veins that kind of prevent us from being heart healthy, from having our heart towards God be all that He would have it to be. Over the course of a few weeks here, we're simply doing a little series of messages we simply call heart surgery. And our primary source in the scriptures for this series are some passages from the book of Proverbs. The book of Proverbs were written, a number of them, by King David and his son Solomon, many, many years ago, not all of them. And it's a collection of wise sayings that essentially say this: if you abide by these principles, life will generally go better for you. Will it be perfect? Well, if you abide by the principles and the advice given in Proverbs, no. But as I've said before, if I could subtitle Proverbs, it's kind of like life is difficult as best. Don't make it worse. And Proverbs is God's way of helping us understand how sometimes to live wisely in a world that necessarily isn't all that wise. But in a book that talks about behavior, it's pretty surprising to realize that really this is a book that talks much more about our hearts than it does simply about external behavior. Now, with that said, these following verses might seem like a contradiction, but allow me to read this passage from Proverbs chapter 6. There are 6 things the Lord hates. No, 7 things He detests: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that kill the innocent, a heart that plots evil, feet that race to do wrong, a false witness who pours out lies, and a person who sows discord in a family. Now, aren't you glad you came to church today so you can hear these uplifting words of God? 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 things that he detests. Okay, what has that got to do with heart surgery? I'm going to suggest to you, and see if I can make a case for you this morning, that each of these things represent an element of the spiritual plaque that can work inward and affect our hearts. And so we're going to basically ask 2 questions of the passage. First question is, what are these things? And the second question is, why does God hate them? And the first question, what are these things? I would suggest to you, first of all, that the language here suggests that these 6 or 7 things that the Bible tells us the Lord detests, that the Lord hates, tend to be things that are descriptive of a general lifestyle. And that there are things of people. It's like eating a bad diet or neglecting exercise over a period of time. Now, recognize also that at any one of the items in these lists, we may experience at any given point in time a lapse of judgment, or we may be reactive in a situation. And as a result of that, we might say or do something that's not really the wisest and best thing to do in that particular instance. And there can and will often be somewhat of a negative effect of that. Now, it can, however, usually redeem itself if it isn't a repetitive type of behavior. He's really talking about people who basically, these describe a general pattern of living. It's kind of like we all know, and I realize there's no condemnation here, but even if we smoke, we realize that smoking is usually not a good thing for our health, and it's especially not a good thing for our heart and for our lungs. However, we cease smoking, the body has an amazing ability to heal itself. And so as we address these particular issues and remove them from life, it also allows our hearts to grow more healthy as well. Let's talk about what these things represent for just a few moments, and then ask the other fundamental question: why does God hate them so much? 6 things that the Lord hates: haughty eyes, lying tongue, hands that kill the innocent, a heart that plots evil, feet that race to do wrong, a false witness who pours out lies, and a person who sows discord in the family. If we were to group those, it's interestingly enough, we would find 2 of those basically speak to the attitude within us. 2 of those on that list really address actions that we take, and 3 items from that list are all about the words that we use. Now, that is a very, very interesting observation for this reason, because typically when we think about acts like this, we think of sin as either something we do, we usually think of sin as something we do which is wrong, okay? Or something we fail to do that we should have done. It has to do with action. And certainly the Bible talks about that. But interestingly enough, in this passage we have at least 2 items: haughty eyes and a heart that plots, that really have nothing to do, firstly, with action. It has to do with the attitude of the heart. And then the other group here is 3 items that talk about the language that we use towards others. And it's interesting to me that there's actually 3 items that talk about the use of our language versus 2 about our actions and our attitudes. And that might give us some idea of why words can get in the way so much and of our own spiritual progress and the progress of others. Let's talk first for a moment just about those that talk about the attitude of the heart. Haughty eyes and a heart, lost my passage. Haughty eyes and a heart that plots evil. What are haughty eyes? Boy, there's an old term. Haughty eyes. Someone who's haughty is someone who is condescending. Pretty simple. It's someone who looks down upon someone else for whatever reason. They're haughty eyes. They're prideful eyes. They're not proud in a good way. They're people, for whatever reason, that their eyes reflect their inner attitude that somehow says, I'm better than you. I'm better than you. Now, I'm not saying necessarily that your lifestyle might be more healthy than another person. It's the attitude that we bring with it that says, because I perceive my lifestyle to be more healthy, or because I perceive myself to be a better person, I perceive you not to be so much, I look down upon you. If you've ever been around a person like that, you know what haughty eyes are. They don't necessarily, sometimes it's reflected in their actions, sometimes it's reflected in their words, but quite often it's just reflected in their general demeanor. And you can see it in people's eyes. And it's this attitude that says, I'm better with you. Now, what about the heart that plots? A heart that plots evil. Well, I'm sure there's nobody in this room that spends their time every day plotting evil. But that plotting reveals something going on in the human heart that's obviously very, very disruptive and creates a spiritual plaque, because it communicates an obsession with getting even. It's an obsession with getting even, saying, look, I'm out to get somebody because I either thought or that person really was out to get me. And so our whole life begins wrapped around about getting even or seeking revenge or any of those sorts of things that the Bible says are evil. In other words, it's something that we're obsessed about, either wishing for or seeking that someone would experience some sort of detrimental occurrence in their life that would somehow bring us some degree of satisfaction, knowing that they've gotten their just desserts, so to speak. Now, I realize that there are extreme forms of this, but I would suggest to you that there probably have been times in each of our lives where, for whatever reason, you don't have to admit it to one another, it might be good to admit it to ourselves, we've had a bit of haughty eyes. We've said, look, I'm superior. I go to church. I do the right things. I don't eat bad food. I don't hang with bad people. I don't do any of that stuff. Therefore, I'm better than you. Haughty eyes. Or perhaps there have been occasions that person or that situation that whatever reason, whatever the original circumstance may, has become something that has so entwined itself around our heart that we can't let go. It's impossible or seemingly impossible for us to forgive and let go and put that one behind. And I realize that forgiveness can be a very tricky road to run, but we begin to realize over time that that tentacle of wanting someone else to experience something detrimental so that we can feel good about who we are, there's something just not right about that. And it's like spiritual plaque that begins to collect in our arteries and over time begins to affect us. So haughty eyes, heart that plots evil, reveal an attitude within us. The two items here that talk about action are, well, hands that kill the innocent and those that race to do wrong. Hands that kill the innocent. Well, I would imagine what is in the back of the writer's mind as he writes those words. The reality was, there are people in this world who do seek injustice on the innocent. And I would there again believe that there's nobody necessarily sitting in this room for whom that would be true. I would suppose that one of the most present day social issues that we face, for which this could be true, is the whole issue of human trafficking in our culture. Where people are victimized and put in situations beyond their control, where their humanity is violated in any kind of number of ways and demeaned in such a way. And the fact that there are people in the world who actually make money and promote this and do this sort of thing. And for those of you that have read or had opportunity to hear about this, you realize that that is a reality in our world. There again, that's probably not true of anybody here, or at least I would hope that would be the case. But you know, we need to, at times, there are times for us to take action on that and do what we can to alleviate that problem as well. And so what's one of the reasons within the church why we do things like Cornerstone Family Ministries? Because I will tell you that there are families that are being served there who have been victims of this kind of action on behalf of others who would seek to condemn, who would seek to prey upon the innocent in order to see that happen. And those who race to do wrong. There again, racing to do wrong implies to me to be a bit of a obsession, okay? Somebody that's so attached to wrongdoing that they just can't wait to get it done. I would suggest those are probably not true of most of us today, but they do reflect in action. Now, let's talk about this third set. The third set. Talk about our speech. 6 things the Lord hates. No, 7 heed, a lying tongue, a false witness, and a person who sows discord in a family. Now, it's interesting to me that all 3 of those usually have to do something with our speech. And there are 3 here that talk about it. 2 of those are pretty obvious. A lying tongue. Pretty much we all know what a lie is. And there again, I realize that in a moment of weakness where maybe we're confronted with a situation where we're embarrassed or whatever, we may kind of wiggle out of it by being less than truthful. Might be late to a meeting some morning and we complain about the fact that traffic was extra heavy. But in reality the truth is we just left late. And traffic may have been heavy, so maybe we were half right. We all do that sort of stuff from time to time, I understand it. Not necessarily advising that that should be the lifestyle, but it happens. We're talking about here about people who basically their lifestyle is wearing such a mask, is their whole life is a misrepresentation of who they really, really are. And God invites us, in the context of His church, in the context of this family, to be honest with Him and about others who we really are. Or those that bear what we call false witness. Those who tell tales about other people which are not true. Those who tell tales about other people which either we know are not true, or perhaps we're simply repeating a tale we've heard, but we don't know if it's true or not. And if we feel obliged to repeat it because for whatever reason, you know what, I can believe that that person would do that sort of thing, so they must have done it, so we feel just, there's all kinds of rationalizations that can go into this whole false witness thing. Now, the reality is, there are courts of law where people raise their right hand and say, I swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, and yet swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, and they tell nothing of the truth. And that certainly was true in the writer's day here. But again, I think there are probably times in real life where perhaps we fall into this trap too. And then the final one, the person who sows discord in a family. Now, think about what the list is and how horrible these things are. And he caps it off by saying, a person who sows discord in the family. In other words, a person who uses their verbal influence to bring disruption to that which God has intended to be a place of nurture, to be a place of peace, to be a place of freedom and of honesty. And I realize there again, probably not in extreme form, but it's very easy to be disruption to a family, be it the nuclear family that we live in, or be it the church family we're in. And there are so many ways and so many opportunities that present themselves to us that we probably need to be careful about this one too, because folks, your family's not perfect and neither is mine. This church is not perfect and neither is the one across the street or the one around the corner or the one that you might end up with someday or the one that you came from to be here, whatever the case might be. There are plenty of reasons to get ticked off in your family or in your church. I get it. And yet that is not, according to the Bible, an opportunity that presents itself for us to continue to throw fuel on the fire to allow it to continue. And so we have these lists of things here that God says He hates. Why does God hate them? Well, first of all, I want you to notice this. Very, 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 very important. God hates these things. He does not hate the people who do them. Okay, now, in extreme form, you probably couldn't blame God if He did. I will tell you right now that God is capable of loving people that you and I might find it very, very difficult to love with integrity. But fortunately, you and I aren't God. And fortunately, we serve a God who has that capacity to love people, despite the fact that they may live according to one or more of these things that God says he hates. But he says, I hate these things. I hate each and every one of them. I detest them. But I do not hate, nor do I detest the people who are caught in the trap of the lifestyle represented by them. Why does God hate them? God hates them because they're deadly. Often these are referred to in broader church circles as the 7 deadly sins. God hates them because they're deadly. They're deadly to ourselves and they're deadly to the relationships around them. And because of their effects on the human heart, because these things soak the life out of us spiritually, because these are the things that create the spiritual plaque that give us a heart that eventually shrivels up and dies. This is why God hates them. God doesn't hate them because he has an arbitrary list of things that are right and things that are wrong. God hates them because he did not design us to live according to these statements. He designed us to live exactly the opposite. And when we choose to do so, God understands what that does to our own hearts and to the hearts of the people around us. This is why God hates them. This is why God hates them. And because they weave their way into our hearts in such a way, like they're those little elements of cholesterol or fat or whatever it is, that clog the arteries of the heart. These things are the things that prevent us from having a heart that is healthy towards God. And that is very, very important. Allow me to fast forward a bit to another passage. And this one talks particularly, interestingly enough, about the words that we use. Proverbs 26 have these words: just as damaging as a madman shooting a deadly weapon is someone who lies to a friend and then says, I was only joking. I was only joking. I used to do that as kids. You know, I'd say something really, really mean. Just joking. Just joking. I never really thought of myself as a madman shooting a deadly weapon. But that's what my words do. Fire goes out without wood, and quarrels disappear when gossip starts. A quarrelsome person starts fights as easily as hot embers light charcoal or fire lights wood. And then this: rumors are dainty morsels that sink deep into one's heart. It's that fat-laden stuff that finds its way in, and sooner or later you find yourself in the spiritual ER and saying, you got a heart problem. God hates these things, not for the things themselves, because they destroy people. They destroy our own hearts, first of all. They may be something that accumulate over time. And the heart, we're not even aware of the fact of what's going on until it's too late. And all of a sudden we find ourselves very distant and cold to God and the things of God. And very distant and cold to relationships with others. Because over a period of time, our heart has just kind of shriveled up and died, our spiritual heart, that is. Or perhaps the effects are more immediate because of these things, just as it can be in the physical heart. Or the other factor here is not just the impact upon our hearts, but the hearts of those around us. We often talk about the fact that if the heart is healthy, everything else will be as well. It really goes both ways. The choices we make and the life that we live greatly affect the heart that we're going to grow and the health therein. And so this morning, my word to you is simply this: you want a healthy heart? You want a healthy heart? It's not a matter of checking out that you do this. It's a matter of saying, you know what? God's ways really are wiser. God's ways really are better. God's ways represent, well, spiritual exercise and spiritual diet, if you will. It will allow me to experience a heart that what God always intended it to be. A heart that's warm towards Him. A heart that's warm towards others. A heart that's anxious to serve rather than to receive. A heart that recognizes and is quick and able to forgive when wrongdoing happens. A heart that is able to forbear the fact that sometimes imperfections of our circumstances or imperfections in our relationships could threaten that relationship, and yet we're willing to look past them because we know that our heart is healthy and we have no need necessarily to continue to hold that grudge or to carry that word. We have no reason anymore to reach out and attack someone because our own hearts are full without needing to do that.